Welcome to the Bourbon Life Podcast, your source for all things bourbon. Join your hosts, Mark and Matt, as they drink and review bourbons, share news about upcoming events, interview the who's who in the bourbon world, and, most importantly, bring you along for the fun of living the bourbon life. Now, here's your hosts, Mark and Matt.
All right, everybody. Welcome back for another episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me, as always, live in the Bourbon Life studios tonight, is my good friend, my beanie-wearing buddy, Matt. Matt, how you doing, man?
Hey, Mark. I'm doing really great, man. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. It's been a beautiful day here in Central Kentucky today, so it's nice. A change of pace, man, up in the upper 60s, close to 70 degrees.
Yeah, let's enjoy it for today, though, because I heard tomorrow is supposed to be biblical amounts of rain. So,
Yeah, that's nice.
Anyway, spring in Kentucky, right?
Yeah, man. Welcome to Central Kentucky in February, right? You never know what you're going to get.
That's the truth.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Well, we definitely want to thank all of our sponsors. We appreciate everything they do for us. With that said, though, Matt, why don't we just jump right in, and you want to go ahead and introduce our guest?
Sure deal. We've got joining us tonight on the Bourbon Life, or this morning, this afternoon, whenever it is you're listening to the Bourbon Life Podcast, the COO and co-founder of Horse Soldier Bourbon, Scott Neal. Scott, welcome to the Bourbon Life Podcast.
Yay! That's my enthusiasm. Yay! Flashing lights and everything. Not quite like one of the talk shows where I get the flashy entrance, but yes, thank you.
Yeah, well, we're sorry. I guess we could have played the there we go, audience applause for you there, Scott. So congratulations.
Well, thank you. Please, no more applause. That's not.
Yeah. Everybody, take your seats, please. Right? Yeah. Well, Scott, we appreciate you being on the show with us, and I know we had originally scheduled this last week, so we appreciate you being flexible and getting back with us.
All good stuff.
Awesome.
Good stuff.
Great. Well, we appreciate that very much. We can jump right in before we start having our conversation. Let's just talk a little bit about what we got poured up. Scott, if you want, because I think we're going to start with the straight bourbon. So if you just want to kind of tell our listeners a little bit about what we got here, that'd be great.
Sure. We call it straight bourbon. It's one of our three main product lines, and it is a higher rye bourbon. So think of, your Woodsford or anything with rye. And the reason we came up with this particular mash bill is after a lot of conversations with bartenders, rye and high rye bourbons tend to go best in your mixed cocktails. So think your old fashions, your Manhattans, your basil bourbon smashes, everything. So this one was kind of our first offering. We tried all different kind of proofs, and we came up with 87 being the best one. And this is also one of our younger bourbons at 4 years, and we're very proud of it.
Okay. So this is because it is a straight, obviously. So age for sure, at least 2 years, but this is at least 4 years. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. And 87 proof. So it's not a Basil Hayden's 80 proofer, but a little bit higher than that, which is nice. Kind of one of those, I guess I don't want to say easy drinking, but when you think of 87 proof, that's kind of that crushable range where it's like you can drink a lot of it possibly. So.
But see, it's still, we don't chill filter this either. So you still sometimes, I'll get a random social media post or a note where you see a little bit of cloudiness sometimes.
Okay.
And you have to educate the customer as to why. They think it's contaminated. You got floaties. What am I looking at? And we're like, well, just number one, shake it a little bit. But yeah, the overall, proof was, once again, it's funny starting from nothing and then saying, where should this end up? And I just remembered probably 5 days of us just, going through, starting at a barrel strength. Would this make a great barrel strength? Okay, well, let's start the next step. Let's take, this to 100. Let's go down to 95. Let's go down to 90, and all the way back up again. And, once again, we just finished at 87 proof being the right proof for this.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's nice. So, Matt, what do you pick up on the nose on this one, man?
It's got a nice nose. I pick up, there's like a sweetness in there for sure, like some honey coming across. And also, I think the fact that it is high rye and a little bit younger, I'm picking up like some spearmint or a little bit, something a little herbal, some of the grain is coming across. I like those younger notes in the rye. I think they play really well. Sometimes when you get a little too much age, or not too much, but when you get some age on them, you get a little more barrel, but I think some of the younger characteristics are definitely present in this that I really like. It's got a lot of character. There's some like a little bit of a brittle or some sort of a like a sweet brittle cracker in there as well, almost like a graham cracker, a little buttery kind of nose too.
Gotcha. Yeah, definitely picking up some of that mint, like you mentioned, Matt. But the honey, that was a great note when you said that, because I was picking up that sweetness and and again the power of suggestion possibly, but the sweetness I couldn't quite identify. But honey, I think is a really good descriptor for that. Scott, were we close?
I love all of the notes, and for Scott, I spent too many years in the military and I've been blown up too many times, so I'm probably not the best sniffer of things.
Gotcha.
Right?
Yeah.
Luckily, Bob and Hunter are very good. They debate quite often. It's lively to listen to them, determine, what they're pulling out of this. And so, I have to rely really on their notes. What I notice myself is, like you said, the honey. I can pick out certain nosings pretty quick and easy. But for me, I have to
Yeah.
spend a lot of time with those tasting kits and retrain my brain what I'm picking up. So I'm
Right.
still a student just trying to figure out, what I'm smelling again and what's going on. But
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way, even though I've been doing this show for two years. But that's Matt's the resident expert on
yeah,
the palate, so he's always good to throw things out. Well, Scott, I tell you what, let's talk about
yeah,
you a little bit. Why don't you,
why
if you
not?
would? Yeah. Well, I mean, you're our guest. We might as well do that, right? I mean,
Enough
it's
about
only
me. Let's
appropriate.
talk about me. Okay. Sure.
So let's talk about you. Let's talk about your background, because you've got a obviously very interesting background that ties in obviously to the brand, which we could talk about the brand and how the brand kind of started in the second segment. But for this purpose, let's talk about you. Talk about your background and what
Certainly.
you did.
So I grew up right here in Central Florida. Always wanted to be in the Army. I played cowboys and Indians and watched every crappy John Wayne movie. And, I knew that's what I wanted to do. So right out of high school, I entered the Army in 1986. And I spent the first couple years as just really an infantry guy in Fort Ord, California. And we had this little conflict at the time called Panama, and that was 1989.
Right.
And I decided I wanted to do a little bit more, so I learned more about the Army Special Forces, known as the Green Berets. I went through the selection process. If you have seen movies or read books, or if any of your listeners are veterans, it's a very challenging thing to get through Special Forces selection. And typically, maybe out of the 350 that'll try out, less than 60 will make it through. So it's pretty rigorous, both physically and mentally too. So it's not just how fast you can run and how far you can walk and how high you can jump. There's a lot of skills tests that goes into finding who has the characteristics to be in Special Forces. I went through that process and I joined 5th Special Forces Group in 1993. Wow, that's a long time ago. Holy crap. And
Almost 30 years now.
I know. Holy bananas. And so I went through the Middle East, and each Special Forces group has an area, whether it is Asia or it's Eastern Europe or it's South America or it's Africa. Ours was the Middle East. So right away I began spending, 6 months, 7 months at a time, either in Pakistan or Kuwait, or name any of those Middle Eastern countries, all the way down to Tanzania, to Nairobi, to Ethiopia, Eritrea, just all of those areas you're operating inside and out. And then fast forward to 9/11, and that's really where the horse soldier portion came into this. And we were like everybody else, looking at the TV, wondering what's going on. But then immediately we, knew we would be the ones to actually respond to 9/11. So it was Mark and Bob, who was the commander of ODA 595. I was part of another task force that also went in on the early days. And so, less than 90 Green Berets at the time had overtaken Afghanistan as little as 100 days. So we thought it was over. Obviously the name horse soldiers, Mark and Bob linked up with the Mujahideen fighters that were on horseback in the mountains. I was more focused on flying even further behind the lines and capturing and killing Taliban and Al Qaeda leaders. So it was a multi-pronged kind of attack, but it really was just a handful of us. So we
Wow.
come back, mission complete. We thought everything was done, and then they had us prepare for Iraq. So we were the same first ones into Iraq, when the invasion happened. And this kept going on for a group of friends, throughout the last 20 years. If you think about it, it has been 20 years since 9/11. And eventually some of us started retiring, some sooner than others. I left service in 2011. I was the director of development for the Green Beret Foundation. So I did some nonprofit activity helping, support a brotherhood and all of those guys who had been injured, or the spouses and children of some fallen soldiers. And probably in 2015 is really when we, all said, hey, the only thing really for old Green Berets is going back as a government contractor. So we decided to kind of break the mold. We started visiting craft distilleries for shits and grins. It was that kind of, let's be on the other side of the bar, right? And let's try this bourbon. Let's try this whiskey. And finally, we started going to small craft distilleries, and you just get into the romanticism of, making it, right? And understanding the whole process and the chemistry and science and building of a brand. So much so that we then went into Scotland. We had some friends that we'd served with previously that was a Royal Marine, and he started a new Scotch distillery called Wolfburn in Thurso. So he really led us behind the velvet rope, whereas typically as a tourist, you start, you go through the tour and there's a line and there's a rope and you can't really see anything behind it. And then they usher you to the bottling line, and then you get to the small little bar and you get 4 samples, and then bam, you're through the retail room and you're out.
Yep.
Well, why in Scotland, it was like, all right, time to turn on the stills. All right, let's go through the milling process of the grain. All right. So we spent a few weeks there just really understanding, distillation. So we came home for that and said, okay, what's the difference between that and Irish whiskey? So we went to Ireland and we spent a lot of time at Teeling in Dublin.
Okay.
The Teeling brothers really started opening our eyes to the business side of the business. Then we went to Kelbegan, which was the oldest distillery still operational since the 1700s, and just understood old world ways in Ireland versus, new kind of distilleries, opening up that was happening in Northern Ireland. So then we came home after that and we started going to Kentucky. And so this was 2015. And by 2016, we decided, hey, let's start making some barrels of whiskey. They'll be our own. We didn't even have a company, that was formed yet. So we had to rush out and put together a company. And we found a partner up north that makes the bourbon, and we make it together. And it started producing barrels.
Yeah. That's really cool. So you guys, how many people are all involved in Horse Soldier with you guys, with you?
So there's 2 sides. There's the Horse Soldier side, right? Which everybody sees the movies and reads the books. And then there's the Horse Soldier bourbon side. So in the beginning, it was just, myself, John Coco, and Elizabeth kind of, adventuring around. And then we added Mark, who was the commander, right? Then we added Bob. Come on, Bob, let's go to Scotland. Hey, Tyler, let's make it to Ireland. So right now we have, I would say, about 7 or 8 of us that serve together during that time frame, to include some of our agency partners that their covers are lifted. And then altogether, we're about 100 employees right now. So the business is growing quite a bit.
Yeah.
So it's, it's been amazing that once again, this started as friends at a bar, and then friends going to a craft distillery, and then, the ill-fated thing that I could do it better that makes you try to form a company, and then all this gray hair begins to happen, right? Trying to start up a business in the whiskey space.
That's crazy. That's a great story, though, man. I mean, it's really cool that you guys have known each other that long. Now, so when did you actually retire from the military?
I did. I retired in 2011. So
Okay.
I
All right.
ended up as the senior enlisted advisor to the director of the Interagency Task Force for Counterterrorism. Right, I had it on my desk. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm like,
How'd you fit that on a business card,
bring
right?
home
It's like,
How do you fit that on a desk?
how you fit it on a desk? Yeah.
when you retire out of the military, I mean, that's it, right? You're now no longer nobody.
Yeah.
You
Right.
have to reinvent the somebody you're going to be. So once again, there's a lot of our friends that it's very lucrative to go and take a government contracting job where you almost make $1,000 a day. And unfortunately, a lot of my friends were getting injured or killed because you don't have that same degree of support. So,
Right.
I was determined to kind of break the mold and say, all right, I want to run in the opposite direction and find something that has nothing to do with my past.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I had a great career. They lots of kudos, right? Some pats on the back. But how do you start again and just, go in a direction that nobody ever thought that you could go in? And that's what we did.
I mean, but that's very cool. But I mean, I think that goes back, military training. You're trained to take on risk and trained to take on challenges, right? So
Well, I think there's a little bit of fearlessness. In other words, during the selection process for special forces, they look for expeditionary entrepreneurs, somebody that can take a risk, will self-discover everything, right,
right.
and train yourselves and each other to be better than your competitors, to use skills like psychological operations, which is just marketing, right, and
Right.
messaging and storytelling. So we had all the fundamentals. And what we found was this kind of passion amongst ourselves to have what we call knowledge dominance, which means read everything, talk to everybody right? Understand the kung fu-ery of Scotch, understand the taekwondo of bourbon, and just become a master of each kind of philosophy. And that's how we approached it. And then the business side, we thought we were too far behind. And we all
Right.
took a lot of the entrepreneurial courses that are available for veterans so we could start listening to EBITDA, to profit margins, right? To cost of goods, all of these terms that now in the business world, especially, in the whiskey and bourbon world, it's just old knowledge now. I could talk with the best of them.
That's great, man. I mean, learning new things and moving forward and being successful
Old
with it.
can learn new tricks. See?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Like learning how to podcast. Not quite as fancy as growing a distillery, but
Well, I mean, we all know how to talk to our friends. It's just how do you, record it, put a quality show
Yeah.
together, build an audience, all those things, that's really the
Right.
hard work, the secret sauce.
That's
So,
right. Yeah, that's right. So speaking of sauce, Matt, let's jump back over to this straight
Nice
bourbon. Thanks, man. Matt, that was almost as creative as you get to be. I mean, because you're really creative with your lines and your questions, man. So I had to take that door and run right through it. So what do you get in terms of the palate and the finish on this one?
It's got a nice kind of like a sweet heat up front, like a sweet peppery from that rye coming across right away. Then I'm just getting like cracked rye bread or cracked rye corn, like pepper on there, like just that fresh baked bread aroma with the rye is really coming through strong with the grain. Really nice, really inviting in that way. But then some of those younger qualities again, like the herbal, it's got a little bit of that grassiness coming
Yep.
through, a little earthen on it as well. But it finishes with a nice touch of oak. I'm actually finding it's a nice sort of finish where that oak is coming through, which I didn't really smell it on the nose.
Right.
I don't get it on the front of the palate, but I think the finish brings through a little bit with that barrel.
Yeah. Yeah. To me, I guess I'd say it maybe finishes a little, for me, it's like the barrels, like that tannic effect, a little bit drying that comes from the barrel, not overly drying. Because that's something that I'm just like, man, when that hits me and my mouth just goes, like I need to drink of water, but this isn't like that. But I think to me, that's how that comes across, Matt, in terms of barrel, but the sweetness is there. Like you said, that's what really kind of surprised me is the sweetness and then that spiciness, like that combination, almost at the same time. You take that initial sip, and you just get that sweetness. It wasn't really honey, but it was just a nice sweetness that came across. But then that spice. So now you said this is a high rye, Scott. But can you say what percentage or around what percentage we're talking?
We are at 27% rye.
Okay, I got you. So that is a high rye, Matt. So Matt's he's a rye fan. So
yeah.
so he likes it. But yeah, now I know some of your stuff's won different. You've won a lot of different awards. So I didn't look to see if this one had won awards. Have you guys won some stuff with?
So we've won double gold at San Francisco, obviously gold in IWSC. I mean, it has quite a few awards. And here it's funny, I like to talk about the business side of this is, okay, you first make it and you hope everything you do, will show up the 4 years when you decide to pour it in there. And then you submit your first, contest. And you're on pins and needles because your aunt will tell you it's the best bourbon she's ever had, right? Your uncle, 4 out of 5 dentists recommended this is the best bourbon ever. So now when you start going to some of these awards, and I had no clue. Once again, we started with no knowledge of this business, right? In all its dimensions. We started with just let's make something. Okay, well, let's make something. Let's pour it in a bottle. Okay, now let's send it for somebody else to give you their opinion. So now you brace yourself because you're ready to go find them wherever they live. If you know what I mean? Like, how could you tell me I had the ugliest baby in the baby contest? And we were very pleasant when our very first award was the double gold in San Francisco. And then we didn't know what that meant. So a double gold, basically, this all blind tasting, no marketing, no bottle, no, mental imaging about the brand. And then if, whatever the panel is, say it's 5 to 7 to 10, all agree that it's a gold medal, then you get a double gold, right? If somebody one said it was silver and then the majority said it was gold, then it's just a gold. So, we're very proud that all of ours has done good. I don't know how many more medals I'm supposed to get. You know what I mean? Because now it's a NASCAR, right? Do I do it every year? Do I resubmit it? Is there a different set ones this year than I do next year? So, it's...
Yeah, it's like, do you stop or do you just say, look, we got 30 awards or 40 awards and we're happy with that?
Then you're collecting awards, you know what I mean? I've heard a few other brands. It's like, okay, do I get brand envy because mine, didn't get 50 medals? So I'm chasing the medal count like at bad Olympic Games. Are you very comfortable that, at least judges and others think of our brand favorable? What I hate to see is did not qualify.
Yeah.
Or holy crap, don't ever send any more of that again.
Yeah. Right? You are excluded henceforth from submitting any further samples.
Yeah.
Well, you said you could go hunt them down. I could see over your shoulder there. It looks like you've got some implements of destruction there. It looks like a large spear and a sword or two leaning on the wall.
I thought I was going to do this at work, and this is kind of like my home office where we were getting ready to move, so I took everything down, and then I look at my background going, crap, I need to throw some stuff up against the wall. So then I just do it. So the spears, came from Africa. So the tall, skinny one with the big point is from the Samburu tribe. And then you got the short, fatter one. That's the Maasai tribe. The stupid sword came from something stupid. I can't remember. And then the jersey came from President Bush. And I go bike ride with them every year. It's called the
I was gonna say,
Warrior
looks
100.
Like a 100-mile bike ride, right?
Yes, and I'm fat and old, and you know what I mean? He's old, but not fat, and he can drive his bike. That ex-president, you never would have so much more fun with an ex-president trying to keep up with him and his Secret Service on a mountain bike ride, because believe me, you're not getting past the Secret Service to try to pass the president, but he'll smack talk you the whole time.
Yeah. Like, come on, Scott.
Keep up. I'm 70 years old. It's like, well, yeah, you got, Dale Earnhardt of Secret Service blocking it. So
Yeah. It's
yeah.
like, thanks a lot. We really appreciate that. Yeah. Well, guys, I tell you what, let's get final thoughts on this first round. Matt, what do you think?
Great. I think it's a good introduction to the brand.
Yeah.
It
definitely.
fits good proof point, a nice drinker. But I think also what you were saying, Scott, is a great one to go and throw in a cocktail as well. It's going to stand on its own, but at the same time, you're not putting in something super rare, fine, or meant to be consumed by itself. So I think it's very versatile.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Scott, what's the retail on this straight?
Retail is $49.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right.
So,
Yeah.
we're not the lower tier, but we're not anything to laugh at either. So
Sure. No, I mean, good price point, and a good drinker. And like Matt said too, that rye, that spice would kick through anything sweet, which would stand out in a drink.
Yeah.
But this is still something I think I could go to somebody who is a beginning bourbon drinker. It kind of a step up, I think, though, from a basic intro type of bourbon. And this could be like a next step for someone that's really starting to get into the bourbon world.
now, ultimately, the funny part is our barrel management. Imagine making so many barrels in the beginning, and you make more, and then now you've got this large barrel inventory. And how do you map out this brand in 10, 20, 30 years?
Right.
Right. And then now you're looking at your loot, all these barrels sitting there, and you say, all right, this year I'm going to pour this much, but I'm going to keep this much.
Right.
Now, do I keep this much for a little bit for the next year? You know what I mean? So now it gets really complex to say, what will this be in 10 years?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's take a quick break.
Save to get to
Yeah.
10 years.
Yeah, let's take a quick break and come back and pick up on that thought. That'd be great to kind of jump in there and talk about that. So everybody just sit tight. We'll be back in just a minute with more with Scott Neal, the COO and co-founder of Horse Soldier Bourbon, in just a minute.
The Stave Restaurant is a bourbon lover's paradise right here in the heart of bourbon country. Located at 5711 McCracken Pike in Millville, Kentucky, between Castle and Key and Woodford Reserve, Chef Kyle Klatka prepares amazing food each day that features an elevated Kentucky-inspired cuisine. With a full-service bar, great bourbon flights, and signature cocktails, the Stave is the perfect place to catch up with friends after a fun-filled day of touring the local distilleries. Be sure to check them out online at thestavekentucky.com or at Instagram and Facebook at The Stave Kentucky. Three Chord's line of whiskeys embody the spirit of creativity. The whiskey is a true collaboration between producer and composer Neal Giraldo and master blender distiller Ari Sussman. The Three Chord team of expert blenders, coopers, and sensory professionals have developed a multi-step process they called Perfectly Tuned Taste. This process begins by carefully selecting the finest bourbon and rye whiskeys from Kentucky, Tennessee, and Indiana, and then blending them together. Find out more about the whiskeys and distribution in your area at www.threechordbourbon.com.
All right, everybody, welcome back for round 2 of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark. With me, as always, live in the Bourbon Life Studios, otherwise known as my basement, is my good friend, Matt. Matt, how you doing, man?
Hey, Mark, I'm doing good. It's kind of weird to not be recording around the table.
I know.
We're on the computers again tonight. This has been a couple weeks.
That's right. So you and I are live together. Our guest is not live. He is in Florida. I mean, he's live, but he's not in the studios.
He's pre-recorded.
And it's amazing. He knew exactly what questions we were going to ask, and
that's right.
He pre-recorded answers to everything. This is awesome, man. So
I know. If only we should have told him to laugh a little bit more, though.
We got a big table down here.
How about that?
What's that, Scott?
The more I drink, the more I laugh. So how about that? Very good.
There you go. Yeah,
make us look
no
funnier.
Doubt. We've got our podcasting table down here in my basement, and seems like the last 3 or 4 shows we've actually done live with our guests here at my house. So it's been kind of fun. So coming back to the computer, it's been a month or so. So it's kind of weird trying to readjust to just sitting on your computer and talking to somebody and having a conversation. But, with COVID, when we started the show back in February of 2020, our thoughts were we're going to go everywhere and we're going to sit down with everybody and do these great shows. And then 3 weeks later, the governor says, we're closing down the state. You're not going to go anywhere. But we found this Squadcast program, this online platform, and it's been great because, we get the chance to have conversations with people like you, which, we otherwise, wouldn't be able to do. So very fortunate.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the virtual world is here to stay, right? It's
Yep.
just how much of it do you want it to stay? So I'm ready to get out and about and see people again. But like you said, sometimes you can reach people and access their stories virtually instead of trying to schedule and deconflict and get people to come in and match your
Right.
schedule. So it's here.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. So we're very fortunate that we've got this, and we're happy to, of course, have you with us tonight, Scott, the COO and co-founder of Horse Soldier Bourbon. You were talking about when we took the first. Well, let's talk real quick about what we're drinking in the second round. Matt,
Okay.
see, I caught myself, man.
I was going to interject there. So you
So what do we got poured up
You
on
had
the
it.
second round, Scott?
So what we have is a small batch, and this is our wheated bourbon, right? So
okay.
it's a 70, 20, 10 mash bill. We really fell in love with wheated. So before you thought Pappy was popular, before anybody cared about Weller and his color of labels, everything, you know what I mean? As you get older, your palate gets calmer, and
Yep.
and this is more of the James Bonnery of a great bourbon, right? It's little victories. And so we really
Right.
gravitated towards it. So this small batch, that's a funny term, is small and batch. It's not defined by the TTB. It is for us about 7
Right.
or 8 barrels. It's funny, we'll lay out 100 barrels at a time, and we'll go through the process. You open the bung up, you let it kind of open up, and then you take your first smell. You want to make sure that none of the barrels have skunked. Maybe I've smelled 1 or 2 over the last 6 or 7 years that the wood just wasn't dry when it went through the barreling process. So that's immediately the first thing, is get the notes, and then you use the thief and you pour out a dram, and you just start going, and you take a sip. You're about 60 barrels into it, and of course you're a little burned out by then.
Sure.
But you'll start to see that this barrel is okay. It's like Goldilocks. This one's too young. This is a little old. This one's just right. And that's how you start getting your mixture, 7 or 8 barrels. You'll look up down the line and you'll see what's pushed forward and what's still on line and what's pushed back. So
Gotcha.
that's our first process of getting to small batches. And then, of course, we'll mingle them for about 24 hours. You really want everything to come together. And then you'll proof it down to 95 proof is what we do. And
Okay.
then you'll let that water and that proofing mingle for another day. And then you'll bottle it.
Gotcha.
So that is our small batch.
So now, is that the same process with the straight? Is that do you blend the straight?
No, the straight, pretty much is a time. It goes ding on the dinner bell, and we go, okay, let's put it together and batch, 100 barrels at a time.
Okay.
I could call it a small batch because there
Right.
is no term.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There is no term.
Right.
And I don't think that our straight was at the time matched our barrel strength for the wheated. So we didn't want to do a barrel strength higher rye bourbon.
Gotcha.
We
Yeah.
liked the lower proof, 87 proof. So with small batch, we wanted something in the middle. I always say Goldilocks, right?
Right.
We're going to try our barrel strength. That's Captain Dynamo. It's the most awesome thing since sliced bread. I love it. Wins all the recognition. She's the beautiful woman of the group. And then you have the rye, which younger palates love it. Different palates love rye bourbons. And then you have in the middle small batch. And this becomes a good entry for us to start talking to ladies who are not just dipping their toe in the bourbon space. They're
Right.
not ready for the full proof yet, right? Maybe their palate isn't for the character of a rye and a rye bourbon. So we kind of introduce the small batch to them, and you get a lot of different notes out of this.
So in terms of your aging, are these 4-year-old barrels, or is it just a
Oh,
mix
these are
of?
6 now.
Oh, they're
Did
6.
you know, yeah, wheat takes a little longer
Yeah.
for the personality of wheat to come and not quite be as sweet as grains, right? So rye is sort of like the tortoise and the hare. The tortoise eventually wins the race, and That's why you'll see a lot of your rye or your wheated bourbons be older.
Yep,
I
that makes
wish
sense.
this was a 12-year-old, but we didn't
Yeah,
start 12 years ago, right?
yeah,
So this is on the edge of what we made back in 2015 and 2016.
gotcha. Matt, what are you picking up on the nose, man?
It's got a real richness to it. Um, by the way, do you blend to a specific flavor profile, or are you just each
We're trying.
bad? Okay.
We're trying, right? And I tell everybody our brand's not 100 years old, right?
Right.
We don't have 100-year expectations. Our brand is emerging. We will be here 100 years from now. I can guarantee you that, right? This is what is for ourselves and our families. So as we get older and we're trying to, get this as consistent as we can, this will this be the same profile 10 years from now? I'd love to find out. If you'll just invite me 10 years from now, let's see.
That's the deal. I'm gonna write it
Hey,
down.
right? And that's the truth of a newer brand trying to grow itself and become consistent and build its, profile. So once again, 6 or 7 barrels. I hate to think when our brand has grown so much, is small batch 100 barrels?
Right.
I talked to some of these other larger brands very quietly. There's kind of this backside of relationships in the industry, and everybody kind of will tell you sometimes, what their small batch ratio is, and others are, they like to keep themselves in the great dark area and not quite disclose it. And they say it's because they're blending to their profile.
Hmm.
Like, well, do
Right.
you have a profile troll under the bridge that you keep there? And I mean, how do you keep consistent? You know what I mean? You
Right.
have somebody that's been there for 15 years that all they do is, keep brand consistency. So those are the questions I ask when a bunch of us get together.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And when you get 350 barrels in a small batch, that's when you're pushing those envelopes a little bit, maybe.
Yeah, I know. What are they holding the Titanic or something? But I jest a lot, but it's curious to it's curious on one side, but fascinating to really be on the other side, right? I'm no longer a consumer. We make bourbon. We have
Hmm.
partnerships. Bottling. We're building a big facility in Kentucky. I speak from starting with nothing and
Yeah.
trying to build something. And what do you want this to be? And we're very proud of what we have.
Yeah. Definitely. Matt, what else were you picking up on there? You started this talking and you ask your question, which was
Oh,
great.
sorry.
No, that's okay. So let's just
There's
jump back to the
a
stop
nice
asking questions, Matt. Just talk about what it tastes like, okay, man?
enough, Matt. Just palate.
Just palate, nose, palate. Come on.
It's got a nice rich sweetness to it. It's really well balanced. It's kind of really mature nose, I find, for especially for as young as you were saying it
Mhm.
is. I think it definitely comes across with the sweetness of the wheat. I'm picking up like some orange or some orange marmalade, maybe like tangerine, something like some sweet citrus
Yep.
on it as well. But it's again like a really rich, really delicate um, citrus on that. It got a really, really great nose, really nice and inviting. I really, really enjoy it.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, Matt, because it's like when I'm on the left side of my nose, I get citrus. But when I go to the right side of my nose, I get like berries. Almost like a strawberry-ish type of
Mm.
smell. It's like a sweet fruit. It reminded me almost of like when I was a kid and we drank strawberry Kool-Aid. I know that sounds kind of weird, but it was almost that strawberry sweetness coming across on the nose for me. But I did get the citrus, but it was like from side to side of my nose. I'm picking up these different notes, which is kind of weird.
Hmm. It's good. Got a really, really, really great nose. Good color on it too. Nice and dark.
Yeah, yeah, definitely,
Mhm.
definitely good. So Scott, we doing okay on that one?
I think so. I've heard many times about the citrus, right? Especially once again, your brain instantly forms its opinion with the first smell, and then you kind of verify it as you're drinking it later on. Now, what's unique is how both sides of your nostrils hook itself to different parts of your brain.
Right.
So if you ever, done the whole full sweep and then went from one side to the next part, it's communicating to different parts of your brain. So it's fascinating to hear where people associate certain smells with what side of the nostril they're on. I usually take a quiz later on and I'm trying to decipher where certain smells come from certain people on which side of the nose of their brain.
Yeah, and that's something I don't really. I mean, I try to do that when I'm nosing, but that was such a prominent difference from side to side on this one for some reason, and I don't know that I've ever experienced that significant of a difference from one side of my nose to the other. So that's why I just had to point that out, because I was like, this is really something I'm not used to, because there's obviously some differences, but yeah, that was really, really significant. So Scott, you were talking about the barrels and talking about, planning out, looking down the road 10, 15 years and how that works. I mean, how do you do that? I mean, how do you do that? The strategizing.
Strategizing. Well, you do it when you're not drinking, because afterwards you're like, let's throw it all together. It's what it's either Irish or Scottish. The Scots are very meticulous, and every penny and every dime and every ounce and every barrel, I mean, they are ruthlessly mechanical, about their whiskey. The Irish are like, this sure is delicious. Let's drink more of it. And the philosophy also comes when you get into what they call your barrel management. And that's looking at your current inventory. So, okay, I just peeled off this many barrels and I want this many more to age, and I'm going to use them as maybe a new product, or maybe trying to age up what I'm producing. All right, now I'm into 10 or 12 years and I'm going to have a separate release, something special, something festive and commemorative. And then I have this bottom line that's going, probably I'll be dead by then, right? And it you don't understand in the beginning because you have to turn revenue, right? I need as much barrels as I can to make as much revenue to grow the brand. Well, we took the opposite approach, and that's why we're only in 14 states.
Okay.
Because we knew we didn't have the inventory to go across the United States, and it's hard because sometimes your distributor or some of these national chain retail relationships want you to be everywhere where their portfolio is, and it's like, I can't do that, right? Because if I wasted all of my barrel model, I could never get to having some superior aged 5 years from now, have a 10-year-old, 15 years from now, or anything. So yeah, that's the complexity that I fight with every day, is determining where to hold, where to blend, where to increase how much of our bourbon we're also making. Once again, did I tell you what the number one ingredient in whiskey is?
No.
Yeah, it's money.
Yeah, that makes sense. I believe that.
Money. And when you're a young company, you can't play with money, because then you'll take too much of other people's money, and then eventually you'll end up not owning your own business.
Right.
So there's a business side to these things that I admire young companies that start up, because they had the courage. Then I understand where they're going to start having a pitfall, and that's in their barrel model or their access to capital to really grow their brand. So it's the truth. Why are small craft distilleries using younger bourbon? Because ultimately you can't wait 5 years and have no revenue. I don't know what business model in the world does that.
Yeah. So Scott, when you guys started, so it's 2015, you retired from the military, you're running around and you're visiting Scotland, Ireland, you're going to places. So what was it that made you guys say, bourbon, that's what it's going to be. It's going to be bourbon.
Well, bourbon, obviously, because we're Americans. We
Right.
learned about national pride. So Scotch is from Scotland, Irish whiskey's from Ireland, tequila's from Mexico. Of course, we're Americans and we want to be all American, right? We love our country. We fought for it. We carry flags on our shoulders during combat. So bourbon was the natural kind of category we wanted. Now, once again, is the aging of bourbon and the patience in your business to get to where you want to be. And we had a little bit of disruption early on because when we started this business, we didn't know that they were going to produce this Hollywood movie called 12 Strong.
Yeah.
We weren't even going to call it Horse Soldier Bourbon. As a matter of fact, our company name is American Freedom Distillery.
Okay.
And we all laughed. We said, freedom isn't free. It's about $39.95 a bottle. That's what happens when you're young and you're drinking, trying to write down your business plan, right? And it wasn't until 2018 when they started producing the movie and released it finally that somebody said, why don't you just call it Horse Soldier Bourbon? And we literally thought that somebody else had the name Horse Soldier and we couldn't even get the intellectual property rights. And it wasn't. And so we got the intellectual property rights. And that's really what began kind of producing our bourbon, but we only had enough. You can see my little bottles here.
Yeah.
We only had enough to make 1,000 cases our first go around. That was it.
So where were you guys? Were you distilling there in Florida, or how'd you get into doing that?
We found a partner in Ohio, and we were introduced by another fellow veteran distiller, Hotel Tango, Travis. And he's like, hey, you'll never get your distillery going in time, and you probably don't want to make bourbon in Florida because it'll start getting too hot and too oaky. And we spent a lot of time with Dan Garrison out in Texas, too.
Oh, right.
We understood heat. So we were introduced to Ryan Lang out of Middle West, and Ryan had just started Middle West, and he had built a beautiful $15 million facility, and he could produce 1.5 million gallons, but his brand wasn't, taking all of his production. So we said, hey, can we fly up there on the weekend? We'll do the stills, we'll run them. You can supervise us. We want to turn the levers. We wanted to be Wizard of Oz, right? Yeah. And do all the things and say, this is our own. And we would fly a Legion Air from Tampa to Columbus, and we would make it. And then we would be done, and we'd let it age, and we go on about our days of, trying to build a business. And now we, have this partnership where, we're outgrowing Mom's Kitchen, so to speak. And that's probably where you saw the announcement of us building a 5 million gallon facility in Somerset, Kentucky.
Yeah. And save that. Don't jump the gun on me, Scott. We're going to talk about that one. That's my third segment. Yeah, but no, that's great, because I definitely want to talk about that, because that's huge news. So that's like third segment talk for sure. But yeah, so you're hooked up with Middle West, but like you said, you've outgrowing the capacity of production there.
Well, I think we've outgrown our capacity. His brand has grown stronger. You know what I mean? It's just that planning again. You know what I mean? Things start meeting each other in the middle, and it became natural extension of our brand is growing. I mean, the story is true and authentic. The packaging is beautiful. You know what I mean? It's everything, all the formula of a great brand is there. Now, what do you need to do? You need to think 100 years from now. And that's what led us to start looking at somewhere in Kentucky and start putting together this impossible dream of building our forever home.
Yeah. So going back to your mash bill and your distilling, when you guys were flying up there, did you guys came up with your own mash bill? I mean, was that pretty much it? You had the mash bill, and then was he providing you guys with grains, or were you having to buy those separate from what he had, or how'd that relationship work?
Grains, you can do a bit of the Chicago board and find your grains. Obviously wheat is wheat. and he had some other wheat categories. So it was coming down to who was going to grow them. Obviously, your yeast strain is what becomes proprietary to your brand.
Right.
And so, but that's a small percentage of overall taste. You'll get some good notes out of your specific yeast strains. But ultimately, we had to get started. We have a 750-gallon still here in Florida. We make great rums. We make beautiful gins, and they feed our restaurant there, the Urban Still House. But we knew you could never scale a business off a 750-gallon still, right? You're just a hobbyist by then. And so that's why we knew the partnership was important. I mean, we did it with the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, right? We did it with our agency partners. So partnership, we understand it very well. They add capability. They added expertise. We added enthusiasm in that primary ingredient called money. And we began to produce our own barrels.
So when you had those barrels, you produced them, aging them also in Columbus or the Columbus area or somewhere. Okay.
Yes.
So
think geographically, you have the pretty much that whole river valley area. The climates are similar.
Right.
And what we also didn't have at the time was some of the taxes that were in Kentucky.
Okay.
And for a new brand just to start out in Kentucky, it would have been very hard, right? There's not too many brands that just, buy a square foot in Kentucky and then, build a super dynamo production plant.
Right.
You just don't get in that easy to the backside of Kentucky bourbon by just showing up with a lot of money and turning something on. So.
Gotcha. Well, Matt, let's jump back and talk about this small batch here in terms of the palate and the taste. What do you get on it as you finish your glass?
It's good. It's got that wheat, really brings through some good heat, some cinnamon right up front. I get surprisingly some of like a little bit of baking spice with it, some cinnamon. There's like a little bit of almost like ginger or nutmeg as well. But it drinks kind of like it noses. I think it drinks really mature for the age, especially. It's well balanced. A little bit of cherries. There's some fruit coming across there. Some nice vanilla, good honey. The wheat is definitely there. I get that fresh baked brie bread coming through.
I'm not tasting any cheese in mine, Matt.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're drinking, man.
I'm going down the charcuterie route here.
Oh yeah.
But it's good. Nice vanillas and caramels. It's got all the hits on that. And a nice comforting warm finish. It's not like super spicy of a finish. It's not really drying. It's just got a nice warm finish to it. I really enjoy it. I think you've done a really great job in the blending and the characteristics of the profile with this.
Yeah, I agree with that, Matt. This finish on this one is definitely something that I'm just continue every drink. I'm savoring that finish because it's a very nice finish. Matt, I get that cinnamon, like you said, the sweetness, but that spiciness a little bit that comes across like the cinnamon. But then that finish, it just lingers, Scott. I mean, this is, really, really good.
So remember, I have kids, right? And these bourbons are my children. I have real kids. That's one thing.
Right.
And all of these become my kids. And then you ask, what personalities each one of my children, and this is the middle child, right? This is the Marcia. Marcia, which doesn't get enough credit because she's quiet and she's consistent and she's always there. And that's this one. Whereas the straight is a little spicy. It's a naughty little kid that likes to have fun and plays well with others. And once we get into the barrel strength, you're going to see that is by far my favorite child, right?
Oh,
that's my daily drinker. That's what we always wanted to have, is what we've created with the barrel strength.
Well, great. Well, speaking of that, let's take a break because we're at the end of round 2.
Yep.
But before we do, I'm telling, I enjoyed the straight. I liked it. But I like the bump up to 95 proof. The sweeter, I'm Yeah, big fan of this one, Scott. This is really good. And I'll be honest, I had never had the wheat. I had never had this small batch before. So I'm really excited to be able to taste it and really pleasantly surprised. Well, I shouldn't say pleasantly surprised, but just it's a very drinkable, easy drinker for me at 95 proof.
Well, thank you very much. I will take all of those compliments.
All right, great. Well, let's get a break in. Get a word from our sponsors real quick,
Okay.
and we'll come back with the final round 3 with Scott Neal, the COO and co-founder
Ding,
of
ding,
Horse
ding.
Soldier, of Horse Soldier Bourbon in just a minute.
Spirits of French Lick crafts their spirits using only the finest agricultural product that has defined character, following their motto, respect the grain. They lead the way in representing the quality of the Hoosier artisan distilling process while paying tribute to its inseparable past. By implementing best practices from those early times, combined with modern touches, Spirits of French Lick has created a truly unique place in the industry. Spirits of French Lick products are distributed throughout Indiana, Kentucky, and Missouri, and can also be purchased online through Sealbox at sealbox.com. Visit spiritsoffrenchlick.com to learn more information and make sure to follow them on Facebook and Instagram. Located just east of Lake Tahoe and the Sierra Nevada mountains, Frey Ranch Distillery was founded by fifth-generation Nevada farmers. Our grain-to-glass bourbon is made using a 4-grain mash bill, including a non-GMO corn, rye, wheat, and barley, all of which is 100% sustainably grown on the 1,500-acre Frey Ranch. And our commitment to excellence shows with a recent gold medal win at the 2020 Whiskeys of the World and USA Spirits competitions. Find out more at www.freyranch.com.
All right, everybody, welcome back for the third and final round, period, segment, session, whatever you want to call it, of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and still with me live in the Bourbon Life studios, just warming himself up there in front of the fireplace again tonight, my good friend, Matt. Matt, how you doing, man?
I'm good, Mark. Still with you, man. I'm not leaving. I'm not going anywhere. Don't worry.
I appreciate that, because then we wouldn't have any tasting notes and we wouldn't have those great questions either, man. So, I gotta have you here.
I'm just here for the tasting notes. We all know that.
All right. Well, tell everybody who we have with us, Matt.
That's right. But joining us for more than just the tasting notes, for the story and everything else, is Scott Neal, the COO and co-founder of Horse Soldier Bourbon. Scott, welcome back for the third and final round. And what have you provided for us to sample on this round?
Well, let's just say that I saved the best for last. My personal favorite, by far the most award-winning and recognized in whiskey Bibles and in lore, I'm sure they paint pictures of this in caves, is our barrel strength. And so our barrel strength is a wheated bourbon. It's 6 years old. The one I'm looking at in front of me is 122 proof, right? But you'll see with this one that don't start with the proof, right? Just go ahead and nose it first. Let some of the heavier proof alcohol dissipate very quickly before you nose it. And then as you start to sip it, you're going to find out how calm this higher proof is, especially in a wheated bourbon. And this is by far, I call this my little victory. I drink it neat. I don't pollute it with an ice cube or water it down. This is as Mother Nature gave to us. And the only filtering, is heavy, char bits and a little bit of micro filtering. But this is Mother Nature and Father Time in a bottle. Have I talked it up enough?
Yeah, that's great. I like that. And our sample that we got, it just says barrel strength. So I'm not sure if we're drinking off the same barrel or same bottle, same.
I would say it averages between 120 to 124.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I've got the bottle that I actually have, and this was actually, I think I bought this maybe in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
Would that have been right? Maybe. This one's actually 117 proof.
Yeah. So okay. So that's kind of pre-pandemic special. If you would have drank that, you never would have got COVID.
That was my plan. I kept drinking high proof bourbon, and unfortunately it still hit me in September, but that's all right. Yeah. It's I made it through, man. Thank goodness for the antiseptic for the inside. It kept me going.
My tapeworm really loves it.
So is this the same mash bill then as
Yes,
the
as
small? Okay.
the small batch.
Okay.
So the
All right.
small batch is proof down to 95, and obviously this is just whatever it comes out of the barrel at the time.
Gotcha. So are you guys barreling then? Are you going in at 125?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So you get that little fluctuation. You get a little bit of a drop in the proof. Sometimes, you see barrels that will actually go up, depending on their placement in the warehouse.
It's older. There's a transition point in age, maybe 10 to 11 years, where it swings. Because what you do is you have water absorbs differently in the wood than bourbon does, right? Bourbon
Right.
clings onto the charcoal. So it's fascinating learning, the unrecorded science of barrel maturation on the inside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So speaking of barrels, Scott, where do you guys? Can you talk about where you get your barrels or who you deal with for that? Or
Well, in the beginning, it was a hodgepodge of who it was in the market.
gotcha.
Now we have a primary provider, and I'm not going to say who they are because I'm looking at somebody else as well. I think
Okay.
there's two kind of personalities coming out right now, especially for a medium-sized growth bourbon company. And then I'm dating both of them, so I don't want to reveal my Match.com date and all of that right yet, because then the other one gets mad too.
Yeah. So there's the possibility you could be swiping right for somebody new.
It's intimate, right? Because once you find a barrel provider, and you go through the process and you kind of contract up and you lock each other into dating for a while, you don't want to shift.
Right.
But there are some unique barrel companies coming online that you also want them to be there 50 years from now.
Right.
So
It makes sense.
we're doing a little bit of dating.
So are you using a char 3 or 4?
4. Love the char 4, right? So I'm from Florida. When I heard about the alligator char, I'm like, ta-da. I'm going to use that.
That's what I want for my bourbon.
It is.
But so that kind of leads me to another question I hadn't really thought about, because you've got a lot of people. You guys are involved with it. You guys obviously came from the military together. You served together. You've known each other for years. You're probably very strong-headed people. So how does that work? I mean, are there moments where it's like, screw you, this is what we're going to do? Or it's like, F you, I'm going to do it this way? Or, I mean, do you have those moments?
In the beginning, you play, right? You're allowed to talk. Remember, you're allowed to look at each brand and start to understand, what chars they're using. There wasn't a lot of data and science. It was just evolving in 2015, if you think about it, right? Now you have a lot of bourbon sleuths and other people that have opened up about their mash bills and everything. So you have to start from, what do I like as a consumer? And do we agree about that? So that's why we made 2. We had some guys that their palates really loved, they loved Eagle Rare. They loved Woodsford, right? And you start to understand, but then some of us loved Weller's.
Right.
And so you say, okay, let's then do both. And at some point, you just have to take a stab and determine that's your mash bill, and let's go forward, right? So in the Army, you're very good about debate early, and then everybody's on board. You know what I mean? And if that's where we can still do some experimentations and open some other lines down the road, once the business is on a strong footing, we can try a non-bourbon whiskey, a high rye.
Right. Gotcha.
You know?
that makes sense.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, actually, Matt, let's talk about the nose on this one, because we've been working on it for a while. So what are you picking up on this?
It's got the nose is very reminiscent of the small batch, but even nicer. It's got, to me, the stone fruit is coming through with it. I'm getting like apricot, that orange is coming through, and it's coming like really sweet, almost like an orange creamsicle type nose, just really, really sweet, really inviting. But then it's also the oak is definitely there. The 6 years, the toastiness from that number 4 char is coming through with it as well. It's got the maturity that is balancing out some of the sweet notes on it as well, bringing that caramel, vanilla in there. But just a really nice, luscious, nothing overpowering, really well balanced, good nose that just brings a lot of really good, inviting flavor. I can't wait to try it. I really, really do like the nose on this.
Yeah, I agree, Matt. I mean, it is reminiscent. It's like an amped up version, I think, a little bit of the of that small batch. So
Turbo.
there you go. Yeah, right. There you go.
Turbo. It's not a Mazda Miata. It's Supra.
It's the RX-7, right?
Yes. Yes.
That was my dream car, by the way, when I was a kid. I had pictures on my wall because I wanted a Mazda RX-7. Why?
You wanted the rotary engine?
The rotary engine. I was like so enthralled with the rotary engine and the look of the RX-7.
Technology and science.
Oh, and I drive a Hyundai Sonata. So what does that say?
Yeah,
right?
well.
Goodness gracious.
Life
So,
catches up.
yeah, it does. So let's talk about the bottle.
Yes.
Because I do have a bottle. Now, let me ask you this, because I'm pretty sure I bought this bottle. I want to say it was 2019, possibly. Yeah. So would this couldn't have been a 6-year-old then? So you were releasing barrel strengths is that right? Because you started distilling in 15, right?
So we initially did some co-sourcing with that, right? Because we knew that this would not be ready yet. And remember, I told you we only had 1,000 cases. Well, all of a sudden, the distributor goes, "Well, we need 3,000." We're like, "I don't have 3,000."
Okay.
Why don't you do it this way? And so some of the original people that taught us in Kentucky showed us how it was funny, because imagine starting a brand and you just learn how to make it, and you don't know what a 1-year-old is going to taste like. You don't know what it's going to taste like at 2 and 4, and how do you know your turkey is done? So a lot of our mentors from a lot of these places in Kentucky, you just go into the rick house, and this is what you want to see for coloring in a 6-month-old. This is what's going to happen in about a year and a half. So those same people that helped us develop the mash bill, they said, all right, here's this in 6 years. Here's this in 12 years. So when we said, hey, we want to get started, but ours is not aged, that's when you have a conversation about, okay, let's acquire some aged inventory just to start building the brand and getting some revenue in.
Mm-hmm. I got you. Okay. That makes sense. So I just wanted to make sure on that, because I was thinking, since we're talking 6-year-old, and I'm like, I thought that was 19 when I bought that, but I could have been wrong.
I invented the time warp about 10 years from now, and then I went back and I put stuff in there, so.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
See?
But the thing I think that surprised me, because you talked about when you pour it, you're like, well, let it dissipate a little bit, let the alcohol wear off.
Yeah.
Honestly, this sat in my glass probably less than 5 minutes, and that was the one thing at whatever proof, because this is probably in the 120s or close to it, that it did not singe my nose hairs. It didn't, burn out my insides when I smelled it. Even it had only been in the glass for 5 minutes or less. A lot of times when you get the higher proof single barrels, even after 5-10 minutes, you're going to take a snort and you're going to be like, holy crap. Yeah. But this one was not at all. This was very, like I said, it was very reminiscent of the small batch, but just a little, the flavors were more pronounced, I think, to me. But yes. No alcohol, no burn. Matt, what do you,
Yeah, I've got to agree with you there, Mark.
Okay.
It's when you had said, Scott, to let it tame out a little bit, I was thinking, I don't know. It smells pretty good right now to me.
I was the same way. I was like, well, I know I poured it a couple minutes ago.
Telling me it's getting better? All right.
I know. Yeah, no doubt. So back to the bottle, Scott. I'm sorry about that. I just kind of went down that little rabbit hole. But these bottles are extremely unique. They're very cool. Not just the label, but also the bottle itself and how it's made. Can you talk about that process?
Certainly. So, as we were learning all aspects of the business, obviously, your first thing the customer sees is the bottle. And Elizabeth, who is, one of the co-founders with us, that's John's wife, she was in the perfume and skincare industry for 20 years plus. So she literally started brands that $1,000 an ounce of whatever perfume of brand X, right? So she understood kind of the necessity of bar jewelry. So she really took the brand and listened to our story, about who are the horse soldiers, about America, about being frontier and pioneering. So the first thing you see on top is kind of this arrow and hatchets, crossed arrow and hatchets.
Uh-huh.
But that's the symbol of Special Forces and Army Rangers.
Okay. All right.
But in our history as America, that's pioneers and frontiersmen too, right?
Right.
Now you look at the front metal label, and what you see is a soldier on a horse, and that's actually the America's Response Monument at Ground Zero.
Oh,
So
okay.
it represents the horse soldiers on horseback in the mountains of Afghanistan. Now, what's truly unique about the bottle itself is we wanted our own bottle. And when you start out as a brand, you have two options. You have to buy a mold and design a bottle that will fit your brand, or you have to buy some existing glass styles. So how many craft brands have you seen that has that same kind of roundish bottle, right? Or the Tennessee whiskey bottle look?
Right.
That,
right.
That's because it comes from Germany or it comes from Mexico. And we're like, all right, we're supposed to be red-blooded Americans. Who makes glass in America? So we were linked up with the folks from Anchor Glass, and they own two major glass facilities, and one is in Lawrenceburg, Indiana, right next to MGPI, and that used to
Convenient.
be the old Seagram's plant.
Right.
So they were full production all the way from making their own glass to making their own whiskey, and then they kind of broke the units apart whenever you had that kind of sell-off for Seagram's. And so Anchor brought us there. We saw how glass was made. It was fascinating. It was the best Dirty Jobs episode you could ever imagine, is watching how, it goes from just silica to into the furnace, and then shot across the top of the factory over to a bottling line, and it's put in a mold that's then air nozzle goes in, and poof, you have glass. So we go through the whole tour, and at the end we go back in the boardroom. They're like, so we'd love to make glass for you, and to make a bottle mold of a bottle design you would like is $60,000. And we about fell out of the chair.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then they said, not only do you need one mold, you need 6 of them. And so, being the wisecracking kind of guy that I am, I'm like, what kind of meteorite steel is those bottle molds made out of that it costs $60,000? We were just grasping our hearts.
Mm-hmm.
And they told us the steel number, and I immediately recognized that it's the same type of density of steel that was used for the World Trade Center.
Oh,
why was that? It was because we buried pieces of the World Trade Center all across the battlefield the early days after 9/11. And of course, we have the statue at Ground Zero, so we know all the Port Authority. We know the construction guys, the NYPD, FDNY. And so we came up with, hey, if I was to get you the steel, could I get a discount on the molds that then would create our bottles? And so that's kind of the background behind how we were able to get our bottle made from the molds that was melted World Trade Center steel. How about that?
That's pretty. I mean, that's really cool. I mean, it's great you had those connections, but it just really strengthens the whole the story of the brand itself, which is very unique.
It's our origin stories. That's why if you look at your label down there at the lower label, it says "Forged in Fire," right?
Right.
That was kind of our military. But if you think about it, this isn't rah in your face. I was in the Army branding, right?
Right.
There's no eagle claws and tears with, red, white, and blue flag imprint. We wanted to subtly talk about our past, right? And leave a little bit of storytelling.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
We wanted the bottle itself to stand out on a back bar or at, your local favorite, whiskey bar. we have to elbow our way against 100-year-old brands, and you have to be distinct enough to have your own bottle to do it.
Yeah, well, this bottle definitely stands out. There's no question about it. The label, the bottle, everything about it. It's very, very unique. And you get the is that like a challenge coin on the?
Got a challenge coin on the very top. We
There's the eagle. There is the eagle.
Yeah,
There's no talons, but there's an eagle. Yeah.
Yeah, see, it's American freedom, because freedom isn't free. Apparently, this one's $79.95.
There you go.
But we wanted the old-fashioned cork sound, right?
Right.
So we tried a synthetic cork, and it didn't work. It sounded cheap and crappy. So everything in this bottle comes from America, but the one thing, and that's the cork. Right?
Gotcha.
So, all the way from the wooden top to the military challenge coin, there's about 12 hidden things inside of this bottle, that people can find and discover. If not, it's this bottle is a reflection of on the outside of what's inside.
Yeah, that makes sense. Matt, speaking of what's on the inside, what do you pick it up on this one in terms of the palate?
It has that nice warmth that we got from the small batch right away.
Yeah.
That cinnamon is coming through, but it's just intensified. The warmth comes through. I'm getting a lot more stone fruit too. There's like some plum, there's some raisin with it as well coming on the palate for me. Then there's that orange or that tangerine, that citrus is there, but nice sweetness from the wheat as well. It's nice I feel like we haven't had a real good wheated in a while. A good wheater. This is definitely it. Nice, nice, warm, good product. It's got a complete flavor from the beginning of the palate to the end. Nice heat that comes throughout, different flavors from that stone fruit. The vanillas, the little bit of the touch of the oak on it. It's not drying on the finish. It drinks really well. I can see why this is your favorite child.
Yes.
And what blows me away again, because we talked about it on the nose, I didn't pick up, the alcohol that didn't singe my nose hairs. On this one, to drink this at 120 or right, I mean, I can't get over how I hate to say the word easy, but I can't get over at that when you say 120 proof to most people, they're like, oh, no way, that'll kill me. This does not drink like 120 proof bourbon.
This is a sipper, right? This is meant for the end of the evening. I'm relaxing, maybe a cigar, and just a pour is all you need. If you think about it, right? This is not a shooter. This is not for your 4 old fashions before you get your big piece of bison meat. This is truly, you need to walk down the hill and have a long conversation with your bourbon. Because if you get too spicy with this bourbon and you think maybe you need 2 of these, you better be in a straitjacket and tethered to your house.
This
kind of like I was last night. Like I was last night, It's okay.
Yeah, tethered to your couch.
That's right.
Yeah.
Scott, I think that paints a really great picture, and that this is like a really great single drink into the night type bourbon. It has kind of those ephemeral qualities to keep you thinking about it and kind of contemplating over it, but it just drinks really well at the end. You can sit here and talk about it all you want, but it just tastes really good.
And it goes to your style of drinking. Once again, I like this neat because it makes you slow down, right? And respect the high proof. Some people, they like, a large cube or a ball in there, and, it takes a little longer for the ice to, start mingling and changing the characteristics. So you'll get something totally different by the end of your glass when you ice it, or even those that like to start off, neat and then add some water and see what it does and how it changes. It's fun to play with it, but all by itself, no ice, no nothing. This is a great sipping bourbon, I think.
No, I would agree with that. Definitely, Scott. 100%. So let's talk about the future. Some big things going on
Big
for
things.
Horse Soldier. Why don't you let our listeners in on? I'm sure most of them probably already have heard or know, but
Yep.
let's talk some about that.
So, we dream big, right? And especially after this barrel strength, you don't know how big we dream after a few of these. But we started this as a way to start a new chapter in our lives, and we wanted something we could grow a business together as friends. That then our kids, because our kids, you can't give them a Foot Locker full of war medals, right? You can't transfer that, but you can a growing business. So then we started saying, where do we want to be in 10 years, 30 years, 100 years from now? And obviously, a great bourbon, is known from coming from Kentucky. Let's not lie. The cachet value of a great bourbon on the bottle should say made in Kentucky and blah, blah, blah. Well, I spent 17 years at Fort Campbell, Kentucky.
Okay.
Right? A lot of our kids grew up there. So to say we're not from Kentucky, well, we kind of spent our adult lives there. It just happened to be defending the freedom of America from weird people and weird places. So we started looking around, and we looked in Louisville, we looked in Lexington, and just so many brands and so many startup brands were just falling over themselves in that area. And we know we'd be a little fish in a big pond. So we were actually introduced by way of the mayor of Somerset, Alan Keck, who had just won being a young mayor in an old town. Said, I'd love to have a distillery here in Somerset, Kentucky. So the first thing we did was Google, where in the heck is Somerset, Kentucky? And we visited just on a whim. Let's go see. And we fell in love with Somerset, the mayor and the people of Somerset. It was literally everything you grew up when you were young in small town America was Somerset, Kentucky.
Right.
The other thing is it was on Lake Cumberland. And what people didn't really know at the time or connect is when 9/11 happened, we were on the Cumberland River doing some training exercises.
Okay.
So now you start getting these God winks of, things are telling you if you just stop and listen. And a small town, right? We loved, small town America. That's where you want to grow old in. Next is we started this journey on the Cumberland. We'll finish on the Cumberland quietly retiring. Then we got into the complexity of how big of a dream do you want? As we talked to a lot of distilleries, old and new in Kentucky, they're like, if you think you're going to build 1 million gallons, it needs to be 2. If you think you're going to build 2 million gallons, you need to build 5. Because you look at all the news articles in the last 3 years, everybody's expanding their capacity.
Right.
So now we had to design bigger than we ever dreamed. So we chose a company from England really to be the lead architect, Roger Stinks and Harbour. They had just finished the Macallan in Scotland, obviously. Here is a world-class, probably the most well-known Scotch brand of everything. And they chose this architect firm because they thought, what would production need to look like? What would the customer experience need to look like for the next 100 years? And so it becomes a mantra, right? What do you want to be when you grow up? And we wanted not to be like everything else on the bourbon trail, because if you think about it, a lot of these distilleries were built for production. Then they started bolting on the distillery experience. Well, we had a blank canvas. So we started this process of collaboration when COVID hit. And so all of this has been done virtually, talking about our experience, our production, our rick houses. We wanted something that was more of a stay and play. That's why we call it Horse Soldier Farms.
Okay.
Because the community spoke to us too, and they're very traditional down there in Southern Kentucky. They were worried about, the image of alcoholism. I've got a distillery in my backyard. I don't want to take my kids there. What's in it for us? So I would have the same questions. And so we said, well, what else can families do? And so we started broadening the aperture. What our vision is we wanted to stay and play, a turn on the Southern tour where you stayed for a little while. And not only do you get a great distillery experience and you see world-class design in production, but we have a 5,000 person outdoor amphitheater. We have rope courses for the kids and outdoor activities. We're going to have 15 horses that are retired military mounts from the old guard and ceremonial units that, folks can ride, and you'll see them out there on pasture. We bought an old golf course. You remember those crazy Hollywood movies? We bought a zoo.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So we thought maybe we'll keep the golf course going. Then we brought in a golf pro, and they're like, no, this is probably the worst golf course I've ever seen in my life. But it had beautiful rolling hills that led up to the lake. You know what I mean? It's as Kentucky in your memory should be, with horses and fences, right? And stables and long approaches of limestone, fences. So it's everything we wanted. It was a small town. It was on Lake Cumberland. It was away from all the other big distilleries, because most people, they'll go to one distillery and they're already looking at their watch so they can catch the bus to go to the next one.
Right.
Get in this rapid pace of distillery trail activities. So it fit our bill. Right now, we did our groundbreaking on October 19th, and that was the same day we inserted into Afghanistan. So it was very ceremonial for us.
Okay.
And we're starting to move dirt and kind of build the infrastructure, and it'll take us about 3 years to complete, and that'll be our forever home.
So you're looking at 2025, possibly somewhere around there?
If I can push them to build faster, what's good thing is we have about a little under 300 acres. So we're able to put, more than just a crew building this.
Yeah.
So, as fast as we can turn, the faster I can turn on the production and the warehousing, and then really, ultimately share that world-class experience. Our hotel is going to be a 5-star Blackberry Farms-esque hotel. Great food, yoga for the wives. Why do they want to come to a distillery, right? Well, they'll come because they have your credit card and they can spend it at the spa. Right? The longer you stay sipping bourbon, the longer they'll rack up some world-class retail.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea, man, for sure. So, will you be transferring then all the operations? I mean, everything's going.
We'll still
to be
keep
down there.
Florida here. We built a beautiful restaurant, the Urban Still House. So, that will still operate here. We'll make rums, vodkas, and gins here, but it just feeds kind of the Florida bar. Up north, in Kentucky, that will be Boozney land. Right? You'll have rides and tours. You can stay as long as you want. All we need is a bourbon train, sort of like in Napa, where you have the Napa train, and then we'll be beautiful.
Oh, that'll be great. Well, I'm looking forward to that, man, when you guys get that started. So is there a concern, or do you have concerns with regard to changing everything? Because you're, bringing production from Columbus, your barrels are housed up there, and then you're going to move everything down to Southern Kentucky. So is there any concern or
climate-wise, there's not much, right? We're able to put a lot of technology now into warehousing that we'll try to, once we do make that shift, that'll be it for the rest of our brand. So, will you be able to detect a difference? Once again, come see me in 10 years from now. Right?
We'll do that.
Yeah, because that's when by the time I build this out and I start distilling and we start pouring that's 10 years from now.
Yeah, it really is 10 years, huh?
I mean, hopefully aliens don't land, you know what I mean? And
right.
So
we don't have any asteroids, don't look up.
If not, let's drink even more.
I'm not
Well,
ruling anything out.
yeah.
There you go, Matt.
Will there be a seismic shift? There'll be subtle shifts. If you're really an expert and say you're the number one fan of the brand, can you taste subtle changes? Yes. Can 98% of America and everybody else who enjoys the brand, enjoys the taste and everything? I would suspect not.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. I'd say you're probably 100% correct on that, Scott, for sure. So we're at the end of round 3, but before we wrap it up, I wanted to ask you: did you ever envision or think back in 2015 or even before that this is where you would be in 2022, looking forward 10, 15 years with this brand?
At the very beginning, it was just a curious hobby amongst friends to have conversations. Once we decided this is what we wanted to do, of course, we're on track. I could show you our original business plan from
Really?
2015 because
Okay.
we're military. We planned,
Right.
and we're exactly where we want to be.
That's pretty impressive. That's very impressive.
Yeah, no doubt.
I love it. I love that. So, Scott, where can our listeners find more information about your brand, but then also find the product?
So obviously, we have our webpage. It's horsesoldierbourbon.com.
Okay.
And you can find us right now. We're in 14 states, from Texas to Florida to Kentucky and Indiana and Illinois. We're expanding greatly, right? You can also find us through any of your online favorites, from Caskers to wine.com to Instacart. So we're available across the board, especially you have some listeners in some of the states we're not physically in. You can find us, through some of our online partners. Also, we have an online partner for our online web store where you can buy Horse Soldier Bourbon as well.
Okay. Yeah. And you can get cool merch like that kick-ass trucker's cap that you're wearing right there. Yeah.
No, this is OG. Unfortunately,
Oh,
here's how it started. You ready?
Yeah.
We printed off these big labels that say Horse Soldier. We're going to put them on some Carhartt shirts. Elizabeth said, that's ugly. I don't like them. So then, because we don't like listening very well, we then sewed them on these hats. And we only made 15 of them.
Oh,
So
man.
these became pretty much some of the most sought after hats ever, because we just told people no.
Yeah, I can see that, man.
Do we
It's a
have
beautiful
some kick-ass merchandise? Yes. We make hot sauces. We make barrel-aged maple syrup. We make barrel-aged salsa. We have a lot of fun. We have a lot of cool merchandise. There's also some stuff, I don't even know why it's on the site. You know what I mean? Because
it's spears. We got spears. We've got swords. We've got
Yes.
long swords.
You know
we got broadswords.
we probably need more adult supervision on our website, but we're having fun. Hopefully what you get out of this brand is we're real, right? We're a bunch of friends just like you, Mark and Matt, sitting there, or friends, together, and you have this passion. That's all we've done, is try to create something that pays the bills for ourselves and our families. And we fell into this world, this 1,000-year-old world of making spirits, and then this 200-year-old legacy in America. And if you think about the history of whiskey and bourbon, a lot of it is about soldiers coming home from conflict and starting their farm and converting those grains into whiskeys and selling those whiskeys for extra revenue during the off season. Right?
Yep. That makes sense.
We're not doing anything that any of our forefathers didn't do before us.
That's very well said, man. Very cool. Matt, final thoughts on this single barrel?
On the barrel strength.
That's what I meant. Barrel strength.
Already drinking a lot. I got it.
Man.
Yeah.
Goodness gracious. Yeah. Final thoughts on that one, Matt. Sorry.
It's been the star of the evening for sure. It's nice nice, like I was saying, just to go back to a good weeder. We haven't done that in a while, and this one really fits the bill for when I think of like what a good, mature nice cask strength wheated bourbon should be. It's got some
Thank you.
maturity on the palate and the nose with it, but also some playfulness from the fruit. It's a nice, delicate stone fruit with it. Good flavoring from the barrel. That number 4 char comes through with a little bit of toastiness. Nice, long, lingering heat, but it certainly is not drying or off-putting on the finish as well. It's really great. I can see why you care so much for it. It's a great expression to add to the portfolio.
Thank you.
Yep, definitely. Well, guys, that is pretty much the end of round 3. But before we go, Scott, do you have any final thoughts or words, anything you want to share before we wrap it up?
No, I think we need to put on the calendar 10 years from now, right?
Yeah.
You know,
Well, hopefully we'll do it again before then, but
Yes.
definitely 10 years.
Yes. Well, I want to say thank you for giving us a voice. It is truly the American dream to build something from nothing, and we've done that. We get better every day. We're certainly are not perfect. Our bottles may change a little bit. What's inside of them will try to be consistent, but honestly, through your podcast is how I'm going to start nipping at the heels of all these big publicly traded companies that don't have an intimate relationship with their customers, right?
Right.
They're too big to care about what you think. So,
that makes sense
for bringing us on.
Well, we're happy to have you, Matt. Final thoughts before we wrap it up, man.
This has been great. It's been truly a fun evening, Scott. So thanks for sitting down with us, walking us through everything, and I'll send out the invite for 10 years from now.
I'll put it on my calendar.
Perfect.
Oh, definitely. And Scott, one thing I do want to say before we wrap it up, thank you so much for your service. Really appreciate.
Thank you very much for thanking me, but there was no thanks required. We were fortunate that we were the ones that were allowed to respond to the 9/11 attacks. Imagine how many people serving wanted to be the ones. And we were fortunate to be the ones. And, but see, that's the past, right? And we're proud of our past, but we're also equally proud of our future. So
as well you should be, because you guys are doing some great things, putting out some great products, Scott. There's no question about it. And have definitely enjoyed the conversation and getting to know you, but also getting to know the brand as well. Look forward to getting to meet you in person someday. Somerset's only about an hour drive south of Lexington. So yeah, not too far away at all.
Well, thank you all very much. And I will see you somewhere at some time.
Yep. That's a date, man. We got that down. That sounds great. All right, guys. Well, we appreciate all of our listeners. Appreciate you guys tuning in and checking out the story. You can also find us, of course, on Instagram and Facebook. If you have any questions, you want to shoot us an email, please do so at thebourbonlife@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. Story ideas, whatever you guys would like to hear from us or see, we'd be happy to talk to you about that. And again, follow us on Instagram. If you get a chance, leave us a review on Scott. Scott's waving an American flag. It's awesome. So it threw me off my game there, man. So, but if you can leave a review for us on your favorite podcasting platform, we'd appreciate that as well. And with that said, I'm going to wrap it up. Send us home with our tagline, which is, may your glasses always be full, and may you keep on living the bourbon life.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. Our mission at the Bourbon Life is simple: to share our passion for all things bourbon with you every week. And we'd really love to hear your thoughts on how we're doing. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at The Bourbon Life. You can also contact us by email at thebourbonlife@gmail.com. And you can always find us on your favorite podcast platform. If you have a moment, we'd love it if you would rate us and give us a review. So until next week, we hope your glass is always full and that you keep on living the bourbon life.
Whether it's rye, sour mash Tennessee whiskey, or bourbon, Davidson Reserve has something delicious to offer any whiskey lover's palate. Pick up a bottle of one of our award-winning Davidson Reserve whiskeys from your local retailer today. Visit www.davidsonreserve.com for more information. And cheers to drinking local.
Founded by J.W. McCulloch in 1885,
Green River was known as the whiskey without regrets, but after a gradual decline of the distillery over the years, the brand had all but disappeared. But in 2020, Green River celebrated the revival of Green River Distilling Company at its original home in Owensboro, Kentucky, led by 8th-generation distiller and Kentuckian Jacob Call. And now, after a century of waiting, Green River is proud to announce the return of their flagship Green River Straight Bourbon Whiskey to shelves around the country. We encourage you to find out more about this new bourbon, aged for more than 5 years, at www.greenriverwhiskey.com.